So we're going to start with Orlando Magic superstar Paolo Banchero went down the other night against the New York Knicks with a groin injury. The report is that the MRI came up pretty good. Put him in a position where he's going to get reevaluated daily as opposed to having a timetable that puts him out a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. It's a little bit more open ended. That can mean that he could be back as soon as the next game after the Brooklyn Nets, which would actually be on the road at the Houston Rockets. Or it could be a little bit more extensive than that. There's 2 games that I think he could probably target as a real comeback if he doesn't come back in that Houston game. The one that I think would come to mind is next Tuesday against the Golden State Warriors. That's kind of where I'm looking at it. I think the Golden State Warriors game is probably the latest that Paolo Banchero will be coming back to the lineup. But the whole Paolo Banchero injury brought up a little nugget that I kind of want to touch on, which is how the Orlando Magic may or may not be able to operate how the Orlando Magic are going to be able to operate without Paolo Banchero in the lineup. See, one of the biggest things that Jamal Mosley has touched on throughout the offseason and in the early portion of this year is 2 things in particular: maintaining a defensive identity and sharing the basketball. And a lot of Orlando Magic fans will tell you that Paolo Banchero tends to be a bit of a ball stopper. See, his association, his player comp coming into the NBA, a lot of people associated him with someone like Carmelo Anthony, another person who had a little bit of an issue in terms of getting a little too happy with things like getting isolation possessions, stopping the ball in the half court, slowing the offense down, and not really helping with real player movement and ball movement in the half court setting, right? So now you have a situation where, for a minimum 1 game against the Brooklyn Nets, and granted, it's the Brooklyn Nets, so you might not have a really great sample size to work with, not only because it's 1 game, but also because it's the Brooklyn Nets. But you may have 1 game, maybe 2 or 3 of a sample size where you get to learn what this team can do without Paolo Banchero in the lineup and see if there is a little bit more ball movement without him, if there is a little bit more fluidity in terms of creating consistent ball movement, creating consistent actions off of down screens and multiple passes and things of that nature involving Franz Wagner as more of a point forward, because that's kind of what Paolo Banchero has played through these first handful of games. Is he's done a lot of bringing the ball up. He's been a big time facilitator for this team. If I'm not mistaken, I think he's right up there as like one of the leaders for assists for the Orlando Magic right now. He had a couple of games where he's had 7 to 9 assists throughout this season already. So now with Franz Wagner, who's been absolutely balling, and it's been very under the radar because the Orlando Magic up until recently were kind of floating just barely above water. Franz is averaging like 23, 24 points a game, paired with shooting around 37% from beyond the arc on 4 attempts per game. He's been hyper efficient. And now you pair that with the fact that he's going to have more on-ball responsibility. I also think this is a time frame where they're going to really have to maximize Desmond Bane. I came up with this theory, and I think it's played out pretty well so far, that in every single game except for one that Desmond Bane has taken at least 15 shots, he has scored 20 points. And of course, you would say, well, okay, of course, a high volume shooter, the more you throw the ball up, the more likely you are to get towards that high points per game number. Sure, no, I would also, I think as much as you could lean into that, the other side of it is, I believe that Desmond Bane is what we call a volume shooter, a rhythm shooter. See, some people are considered streaky shooters. These are people that simply, on a night-to-night basis, you never know how dangerous they're going to be as a knockdown shooter. One night, they'll go 1 of 6 from beyond the arc, and you don't know what kind of time they're on because they feel like a net negative on the floor the entire time. The other side of it is where they are 7 for 10 from beyond the arc and just had a really hot night and they were able to knock it down and it turned into a career high performance. Desmond Bane isn't one of those players. He's someone that is established now after playing 2 years where he didn't have to really share the ball with John Morant nearly as much because John Morant missed a lot of time. John Morant's missed a ton of time over the last handful of seasons. Desmond Bane has developed more on-ball chops in a way that's forced him to be more demanding as both a ball handler and a self-shot creator. So he's someone that needs real touches, needs consistent touches, and consistent opportunities to put the ball in the basket to really find his rhythm within the game. And I think a lot of people would look at Desmond Bane and say, well, he was brought in to be a knockdown 3-point shooter. Why does he need to be so featured in the offense? No, 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 no. He needs to be featured in the offense because of the fact that they brought him in to be more than a 3-point shooter. See, he was brought in to improve their 3-point shooting while adding another perimeter ball handler to give them shot creation outside of Franz on the outside and Paolo Banchero on the inside and in the mid-range area. In order to maximize that, you have to let this guy operate with the ball in his hands more often. And I think that the Magic have been better off in situations where they've allowed Desmond Bane to get more on ball reps. And I think you go back to that game against the Portland Trailblazers 2 games ago, and I genuinely believe that that's going to be an inflection point for this Orlando Magic team. I think two things can be true. I think that this Paolo Banchero situation is going to be good for the Orlando Magic in terms of trying to sit down and really establish what kind of identity they want to lean into. Because I think if the ball movement, pace, and space thing works without Paolo on the floor, I think he's going to have to come back and assimilate to what's working for the team. I think if they struggle to be able to generate real offense and things of that nature, Paulo comes in, he has to put the superhero cape back on and be that guy that helps them kind of get back afloat. So it'll be a really good litmus test for them. But also, I think it'll be a really good chance to kind of force Desmond Bane to be more aggressive, put Desmond Bane in more positions, and also Jamal Mosley force him to trust someone like Desmond Bane more often. Draw up more plays to get Desmond Bane free. Draw up more opportunities for him to be able to get good looks at the basket. So this Paulo Banchero loss, I don't think it's going to be that long of a injury sit down. I think he's going to only miss maximum 3 games with this issue. But I think in those 3 games, the Orlando Magic are going to learn a lot about themselves.